Hey everybody, this is Julie Quinn here, and I'd like to go over the using evidence reading that you had for class this week. And it's a pretty basic one-page text that is just a reminder of things that we've spoken about before in class about, using evidence and how evidence can be used in a variety of different ways. It's going to be fairly impossible to write an argumentative essay in this class that's research-driven. That's, you're required to do research without providing evidence from credible sources. And so this Indiana University Bloomington Writing Center reading tells us that when you use evidence, you're acting like a lawyer. You're convincing an audience by using specific data in the right places in an argument to reinforce the arguments that you're making and to make your claim, which is your thesis, stand up. So as you scroll down in the reading, it says incorporating evidence. There's different ways to do that. Obviously, we offer evidence that agrees with our stance up to a point, and then we move to analysis. And if you think about it this way, we do what's called writing around the evidence, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. You grab a piece of data from one of your sources that you find is particularly compelling. If you quote it, you put quotes around it. If you paraphrase it, it's entirely in your own words, but you always name your source regardless of paraphrase or quote. And then you expand into analysis. You're like, well, what does this actually mean? You interpret the data, because remember, not everybody's going to see the same piece of data in the same way. When we get to counterpoint paragraphs, you'll present evidence that contradicts your stance. Like from a source that doesn't agree with you, you'll present their position, and then you can respond to that, whether you refute it or you concede a point. You can use sources against one another as if they're having a debate within the pages of your text. That's not something that I think we're going to do too much in 111, but that's something you can certainly think about doing. And obviously, we use quotations to support the assertion, not just to restate the claim. So you make an argument and then you have a quote from somebody that says the exact same thing. That doesn't actually propel your argument forward at all. So we state your claim. Think of a topic sentence. Topic sentences we've worked on in prior assignments, where you tell us what the paragraph is going to be about. You give us like a hint. Westernized academic writing is very straightforward. There should be, in nonfiction argumentative essays, there should be no mystery as to what the paragraph is going to be about. So you're specific with the paragraph, then you present the evidence, and then you comment on the evidence to show how it supports your thesis overall, how it ties to a prior idea, and so on. There are ways that you can bring in evidence, like this is an evidence from a source named Gleich. However, if you don't contextualize the evidence, if you're not clear with explaining the significance of it, your readers may not know where the boundaries are for for the borrowing of the evidence, or they may not even believe you. For example, a weak source of evidence. Today we're too self-centered. Most families no longer sit down to eat together, preferring to eat on the go while rushing to an appointment. Gleich 148. Everything is about what we want. And there's so much wrong with this. Everything is about what we want isn't much of an unpacking. It's not much of a clarification. The shift in first person plural point of view is a little bit distracting. The evidence isn't related to the claim. Being self-centered has nothing to do with sitting down, eating on the go. Self-centered is an action of self-promotion, so the examples don't actually even fit with the topic sentence, the data point, and the discussion, right? So you always want to make sure that the data is all related. Look at the stronger example. Today, Americans are too self-centered. Even our families don't matter as much anymore as they once did. Other people and activities take precedence. In fact, evidence shows that most American families no longer eat together, preferring instead to eat on the go. So we've got the self-centered, but we've got a little bit more of a discussion to explain how being self-centered ties to not eating together. It's that one's focusing on one's own issues and not prioritizing the family. And then that is discussed and what we call unpacked after the borrowed data. Now, remember, when you borrow content that's word for word, you want to make sure you use your quote marks, and you want to make sure you name your source. This is an MLA example of naming a source, and you'll notice that in the using evidence reading, there are no article titles because you don't need them. In Essay 2, when you wrote for English 111, if you're in my 111 class, you wrote a plan essay, and you would have your author's name, and then you'd have an article title. And the only reason we put the titles in there was because your author name had multiple articles or sub-web pages we were borrowing from. In Essay 3, that's not even going to be a concern, so your documentation should be easier. You probably have a bunch of different sources, not the same author with multiple texts, and so it's going to be easier to cite your sources. And lots of ellipses. This just means you took out information from the middle. You don't want to have a really short quote with bunches of information taken out from the middle. That's probably pretty distracting. Let's see. Citing your sources, just some reminders of quoting, paraphrasing, summarizing, and let me give you an example from one of the 111 course readings. One of the 111 course readings was ill communication, technology, distraction, and student performance. And that's a reading you had this week, and I'll do another video that goes over a reminder of how to read these academic documents, because you actually didn't have to read all 46 pages of it, right? Throughout this article, it explored cell phone use in high schools and the student performance, and how having that technology, having quick access to that technology actually was significantly detrimental to students' use. And so in the reading of this, imagine I'm a student writing a paper on cell phone use. I found this that I thought was really important. This is a piece of data, a specific piece of data I'd want to borrow. By exploiting differences in implementation rates, our results indicate that there is an improvement in student performance of 6.41% of the standard deviation schools that introduced a mobile phone ban. So imagine that I'm going into education, right? I'm in education already, and I'm writing a paper on technology in the classroom. And I want to argue that cell phones and laptops and tablets, for example, cell phones, tablets, and other portable technology like laptops should be limited. So we know that I've got a thesis statement in K-12 classrooms. So we know I've super limited it to not college, but K-12, to specific in-class activities. We probably want to hyphen that. Only because they distract the user from class conversations. They negatively affect those sitting nearby who are not using the technology, and have the largest negative effect on the poor and working class students. This data could have been gleaned from that article had you read the article about distraction. And if we're using evidence, there's that piece of evidence that I found from the article. By exploiting differences in implementation dates, our results indicate, right, that there's an improvement of 6.1%. We probably don't even need this first part. If we're specifically going to talk about the data, there is an improvement in student performance of 6.41% of a standard deviation in schools that have introduced a cell phone ban. And then we always introduce, in a body paragraph, when we write around the evidence, we introduce what the paragraph is going to be about. The most important reason why portable technology should be banned in K-12 classrooms is that when it is, students tend to do much better, tend to perform about half a letter grade higher. Well, students tend to perform better. Let's just leave it a little bit more general. It's a topic sentence, but I know exactly, it's tying to my thesis. I know what the paragraph is going to be about. It's about student performance. So I have a topic sentence, and then I include a quote. There's an improvement in student performance of 6.4% of a standard deviation in schools that have introduced a mobile phone ban. And I name my source. I haven't modified the quote other than taking out part of the beginning, which is fine. There's always something that comes before, generally speaking, what you borrow in a quote. And then I move into explanation. If we remember, it's a topic sentence, it's evidence, and it's discussion of the evidence. You can start this discussion by "this means that," and I know that feels very sort of formulaic, and that's purposeful. The idea is that eventually your writing will become more sophisticated, and what you'll end up doing is saying, "This shows, this means." Beland and Murphy point out that your phrasing can vary, but the idea is we're indicating a piece of data that we're showing through evidence sharing in a quote, and then we transition to that when student cell phones, 2 words, are not allowed in classrooms in high school. Students outperform their colleagues at other schools, and I'll fix my spelling in a second, who were allowed access to their technology. And that is actually what it means. This part here should not be ignored. I think a lot of students, when they're writing around the evidence, forget to explain what the quote is actually saying. So my argument was limited to in-class activities, and I can now expand from that piece of data and say, of course, there are times when cell phones or tablets are effective in class activities, such as students performing or watching a particular video. However, those activities are planned by the teacher and are not. And are not outside the core content of the discussion. Those activities, when they're planned by an instructor, where small groups are doing research together on a tablet, or looking up the definition of a term maybe through an online dictionary. It's a lot different than somebody who is using social media use. Okay, so you can see how just by starting the writing around this piece of data, I'm actually going to take off the highlight here because we don't want the highlight for a second. The piece of data that was borrowed is just this part right here. You can tell that most of the writing of the paragraph is the student author's writing. The content that's borrowed is short. The quote is short and effective. We have a discussion. This discussion is naturally moving into how a student can explain how banning technology in the classroom will positively affect student grades. However, that there are times when using technology, as long as it was planned by the instructor, planned by driven by the content of a discussion led by a teacher, can actually benefit students. And so what we may want to do here is that the discussion went in a different direction. Of course, this indicates that maybe the writer found some information from another source that they want to include, so they include a new piece of data and a little bit more discussion. So body paragraphs can grow beyond the original topic sentence. Why portable technology should be banned in K-12 classrooms. Portable technology that has access to social media. Maybe, like personal. Oh, let's see why. Personal portable technology, because then the implication is that it has access to the social media part of it. So technology is not bad in the classroom, but when students tend to shift toward wanting to stay in touch with their friends or to check an email, they move away from the course discussion. And there's a lot of data out there in educational peer-reviewed journals that actually talks about this. And so in the end, when you write around the data, think about a piece of data that you're borrowing. Think about how you explain that data, and then think about where it takes you from here. It may end up being that this becomes a secondary paragraph, and we move into an argument about when technology is beneficial, and that's fine too. It all sort of depends and flows based on the sources that you found, the arguments you're trying to make, but the arguments can't be made unless you use evidence. So I hope this has been a little bit of a helpful discussion to show you how to write around the evidence. And if you have any questions, just let me know.